You.
I'm gonna go get some water.
See you later.
I know. Now we have to hurry to get water.
And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. It is great to be back here with you all in one of our regular sessions. We're going to get to an opportunity to review an artist's work. So with that, I'd like to welcome our featured artist, June Harmon, who's joining us from Ottawa in Ontario, Canada. And June, if I can get you to unmute yourself there, we'll welcome you into the session. Good morning, June.
Hello. Hello.
June, thank you for joining us and giving us the opportunity to talk about your background and your work. And as we are wont to do, if you could start by telling us just a little bit about your background and how you came to create art, we'll start there.
All right. Well, I was trained as a commercial artist. I was a graphic artist, an illustrator, an art director in my hometown of Vancouver. And in about the late 90s, I decided to leave the field and devote myself to be a fine artist. That was always my intention from the very beginning. I just wanted the discipline and the instruction that I got from being a commercial artist. And so I've been doing fine art since about 1996, but not able to devote myself to it full time because my mom had a stroke shortly after I quit my commercial art job. So I've been her caregiver for 20 years or so. And now she's passed on and I'm back to devoting myself full time to fine art. I was always producing art. I was always having solo shows, but as you can understand, not able to commit myself to a commercial art gallery relationship. So now I'm full of intention and energy and ready to go.
Vigor.
Vim and vigor, the very same.
Yeah, and so did you grow up in the Ottawa area? What's your background that way?
No, Vancouver. I'm a Vancouver native. Third generation Vancouverite. So that's the other thing that happened. We recently relocated to Ottawa, the other side of the country, bought a house, renovated it. I now have my first custom studio. Look at that, yeah. Everybody, full of art and huge. Yeah, so I know I'm not working out of a third bedroom anymore, which is really nice. Yeah, so as interesting what happens when you completely change your life and relocate. My art has changed as well, which is what
yes, we're going to see that as we look at your work, and let's do that. Let's take a look. You had submitted 5 images for our review, and you mentioned that this is a newer body of work for you. So let's talk about kind of the maybe the jumping off point for these and your inspiration for the subject matter and the style.
Mm-hmm. Well, all my previous art, if you've been to my website, you'll notice it's heavily human figure, quite realistic human figure, though there are lots of aspects of abstraction, particularly musical abstraction, lots of patterning, but realistic. And that was no longer really satisfying me. I do have a side gig as a dance caller. I've been a dance caller for 35 years. I work with live musicians. All the people in my paintings are people I work with. And I've been primarily interested in depicting music, human figure involved in music. But that wasn't satisfying me anymore, particularly the imperatives of realism. I know too much about the human form, the instruments, how musicians play. I couldn't abstract it. My work wasn't giving me any place for my imagination, so it wasn't satisfying me anymore. I was getting tired of realism. So I thought, okay, where else can I go? I have a side interest, which I'll talk about later, but it blossomed into these works, which allow me to go all kinds of places with my imagination. They allow me to use my design principles, my design training, but it also gives me a chance to create a really personal language, which is what I was after. Lots of patterning, which relates to my previous work. The human figure is there, but I can move into abstraction with it. I just have so many more places for me to go intellectually and in my imagination, which is why I'm finding this work really satisfying. And my question, I guess, to the assembled artists here is, if you don't know the inspiration for this work, is it intriguing? Does it stand alone? Can you find your own message within it?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about in that regard, and I've got some good feedback already, and definitely some discussion. But it's interesting, June. This transition that you've gone through. Do you feel like it's been? Have you gone cold turkey, so to speak? That you've just really given up the realism and shifted completely over to this more abstracted style, or are you still doing some of both?
I'm still doing some of both because my heart is with these subjects of music and dance. Haven't been able to do any for 2 years, so it's not front and center for me anymore. I'm not up in front of a room of 150 people calling dances and going to musical sessions, and I'm not in that milieu anymore. It won't be for a while yet. But I will go back. I think I'll go back and forth. But what I'm searching for, I think, with my human figure and musical subject matter, is a way in a more abstract way. And switching over to this series, I'm quite abstract. I think in the future I'll be able to go back to human figure involved with music and dance and bring that ability to abstract it. That's what I'm hoping for. So I don't want to completely leave that behind, and I'm not. I'm still doing some work with that subject matter, but it's this new work is really kind of refreshing my ideas about how to depict the human figure without the imperative of realism and the discipline of realism.
And so talk a little bit about then maybe experience you've had in terms of showing your work and marketing and sales, and what your experience has been in that regard.
I've always found buyers. I've not been able to really market my work heavily. I'm not on social media, and I won't be for my own personal reasons. I think it's a toxic playground, but I've a lot of my buyers have been musicians and dancers in that big community that I'm involved in, and so it's also part of their heart landscape. So a lot of people buy from that point of view. But yeah, I mean, I've sold a lot. If I go out and push it and have shows, I sell. But I think the human figure realistically depicted is a hard sell. Landscape is king, of course, and you really have such a small slice of the market if you're doing realistic human figures. I'm sure.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit then about it's you're making a transition, and we're going to hop over and look at your website in just a minute so we can kind of see some of the different bodies of work. But is there some concern that as you are creating these much more abstracted, much more graphically inspired works, is there a concern, well, will I be leaving my current collectors behind? Will they be confused by this new work, or has it just kind of happened naturally?
I think it's happened naturally. People who like my work like the patterning that I do, which is to depict the unseen. When you look at my work of musicians and dancers, the patterning you're seeing is the music and the energy and anything else that's unseen. That answered my problem. I moved into abstraction and patterning to be able to communicate music and movement and energy. I'm not worried about my collectors because I don't have anyone that's madly collecting my stuff. It sells to a vast array of people, and no, I'm not worried about that. to
Good,
answer.
good. Okay, and so we get a little bit of a chance to look at presentation. Would this presentation, the black floater frame, be fairly typical of how you're presenting your work? Is this your kind of your general approach to presentation?
It is, yeah. I particularly this new work presents well in that contemporary, sleek floater frame look. If something is on gallery depths, cradle panel, like most of my work is on cradle panel right now, I won't bother framing, but the shallower work I'll just put in a floater frame. Yeah.
Okay, good. And so, I guess then the follow-up question would be, with this new series, have you started to find buyers for this work? Has it started to move out into collectors' collections?
I haven't shown it. Except very narrowly, to friends and artist friends. I'm with a co-op gallery, and I've put a few pieces up there just to see people's reaction to it. I only have about 15 pieces, and I'm still developing. I find each new piece shifts a little bit, although these ones I presented here are pretty representative of what I'm doing, but I feel like until I've done maybe 25 pieces, I want to stand back and then say, okay, where is this going? So no, I have not shown it much.
Good. So I think this is a great opportunity, and part of what was interesting to me in talking with you and about your work is that you're going, you are having this transition, and I think that this is this idea is something that I think a lot of artists toy with, especially as you've been longer in your career and you have built a larger body of work. I think it's almost inevitable that an artist is going to come to a point where they're going to say, do I want to maybe try something a little bit different? And it's interesting, as I've worked with artists over the years, it almost seems like the artist who is doing more representational or more realistic work is almost inevitably going to want to shift gears and become looser and more abstracted. And the abstract artists that I've worked with will toy with going in the other direction, that you just almost inevitably want to play with some opposites and see what the possibilities are. And so I do want to talk about that. But before I do, I just want us to briefly focus on this body of work and talk about it in and of itself. And then we'll shift gears and kind of talk about the transition. So I would love to get some feedback. I'm going to start with a couple of comments that came in via email. Catherine Holland from the UK said, fascinating and mysterious, colorful and pleasing to the eye. So I got a lot of that kind of response to the work, that just, experiencing it raw and, not knowing much about it, that it has an attractive quality to it, that it doesn't feel necessarily like, hey, this is a new body of work that's coming from an artist who hasn't done this work before, that it does have a refinement to it. Kate says, great body of work. I had no trouble recognizing your point of reference in the cave drawings. You've taken off from your inspiration in a very imaginative way. Some of that kind of raw, primal, primitive feel. And then Linda from North Carolina says, the heavy black frame on one of the presentation slides probably takes away from the vivid colors in the artwork. It seems as though more visual space, a white mat and a narrow metallic frame or simple natural flat edge wood frame would complement the piece more favorably. So, some perspective there in terms of thoughts. And these are always a little challenging, because no matter how you presented it, if you had done it in a more natural frame, someone else would have said, I wish you'd done something more contemporary, maybe think about black. It's always going to go that way. But there's just some initial feedback. I would love to get those of you who are in the panel to hop in and give some feedback in terms of what your initial impressions of the work were. Did you feel that this body of work is consistent? What was your emotional response to the work as you experienced it? And if you want to click on the hand icon to hop in or throw a hand up in front of your camera, I'd love to get some of your voices in on the work. And if I don't get volunteers, I will do it the Army way and volunteer you. Melanie Brannon, can I get you in? Should be asking to unmute.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I've got two Melanies here. So Melanie, let me go to Melanie Brannon first, and then I'll
Okay.
come back up to you, Melanie.
Okay, guys, this is Melanie Brannon. I'm in Dallas. When I first looked at your work, I was blown away. I knew immediately it was Indigenous, which is such a beautiful thing to work on. I loved the layering and layering and layering and layering and the process art, the mark making. I could instantly tell you were a graphic designer because of your composition. Absolutely blew me away. And your palette is way over the moon. You go, girl. I love it. I'm so
Awesome.
thrilled. I'm so thrilled. to see it.
And I love that response. And I do think that, art can evoke a vast array of different responses, right? And some art we look at and the response is going to be, I love the subtlety and the softness and the harmony in the work. And it's
That's
very
not me.
soothing. And some work is very exciting and energetic. And, I love that about art, that we can just evoke that array of different responses from a clientele. And, obviously some clients will be excited by the work, but say, well, that won't fit into my aesthetic in my home. I want something that's more soft and gentle. But some clients do want that energy and that excitement. And so I've said it here many times, but for every work of art and for every artist, there is a collector and collectors out there who are just going to resonate with what you're doing and respond to it. And I think with work like yours that has a lot of energy going, you're certainly going to evoke a response. And that's a great place to start. Melanie, let me get you in. There we go.
I'm not sure I have much to add from the other Melanie. Besides, I love your new work. It's very intriguing. It pulls you in. I love the color palettes that you're using. And for me, it let my imagination run. So, which I really like in more abstract work. So, yeah, I think it's fantastic. I
Awesome.
love your transition.
Thank you, Melanie. And Santana, I think I see you've got a comment as well. Oh, Santana, let me see if I can get you unmuted here. It looks like we've still got you in the mute zone.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, it instantly made me think of petroglyphs and of the ancient paintings from Lascaux, where they found in the caves, and it captured for me the spirit behind the form and linked in the forces of nature, suggestions of the moon, and the rhythm and flow of life, the dance and the music. And I do love your colors, textures, and patterns. So that was my impression. So thank you.
Well, certainly there's music and dance in everything I create. I've been, as I say, I've been intimately involved with dance and music all my life. And while I don't play an instrument at all, really, music is in everything I do. So even if I'm doing a landscape or a still life, which I don't do anymore, it's full of music, because that's the only way. I guess it's a cross connection in my senses that way, but I'm always working rhythmically, but that's also my training in graphics and that kind of thing. You're bringing in rhythm and the elements and principles of design closely related to the making of music. They go across all the artistic disciplines. So the elements and principles of design and their musical connections, that's the base of my artwork, I think, really.
And so we've heard several different responses, kind of talking about the primitive or indigenous nature and the rhythms of the work. And is that something that you've kind of been consciously thinking about and pursuing? How deliberate is that effect?
Well, that's why I didn't really want to express what this is from. It's not I guess the connection with what we would call indigenous art or primitive art, which I don't agree with primitivism as a term, but the inspiration for this is the early experience of Homo sapiens, the species of human that we are, entering into the European landscape, meeting up with our close relatives, Neanderthals, Denisovans. I've done a deep study of early humans and archaic humans and the artwork that they left. Now, of course, most people have some sense of the cave paintings, Lascaux, Chauvet, all the beautiful work that was left in those environments where they could be preserved. But what is interesting to me also is the fact that for every depiction of an animal or a human being, there are 4 or 5 kinds of abstract symbols. And so in each one of my artworks, you'll see perhaps a human, perhaps animals, but the abstract symbols that accompany all of these things, all of these images are really my jumping off point. Because I don't want to reproduce the beautiful animals and paintings that everyone knows. My entry point into this is the graphic work, the abstract symbols that are now being studied and inventories of them compiled. It's a language because they were communicating across thousands of years, across thousands of kilometers. The same symbols appear in these cave works. So they knew what it meant. We'll never know. And it's that mystery, something we'll never understand, what a certain symbol meant. And I love that, because I used to communicate with graphic symbols in my work, and I understand what these people were doing, even though I'll never know what they were talking about.
Yeah, at least not on a literal level.
Never, nope. So it is kind of indigenous, and it's our early history, the early history of all of us, sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, all these early humans, and how they communicated. And that's my entry point. I want to keep it to the European imagery and maybe some North African. I don't really want to venture too much into, say, North American. I mean, there are these issues of appropriation and whatnot. I'm a European descended person, so I'm focusing on the European archaic art as my inspiration.
Okay, good. I've got a couple of other comments then that are coming in. Gay, let me go to you, and then I'll go to Michelle.
Just briefly, this is absolutely lovely work. That sounds like a light phrase, but for me it isn't. It's lovely work. I wondered, and I know you just mentioned you wanted to stay in the European theater and stuff like that, but these remind me of the Aboriginal dream paintings. I don't know if you're familiar with them, you must be. Especially this one, the Seek Shelter.
Yeah.
Their use of repetitive marks, and yet their swirling motion and their images and their contexts have just been fascinating me. I'm not going to be painting like that, but I looked at this one and that's what I thought of straight away.
Well, the interesting thing is that all humans create using the same shapes around the world. So of course it's going to relate. The work of Australian Aborigines is going to relate to the work of European archaic humans, which is going to relate to the work of people in North America or in Siberia, because all humans work with the same set of symbols. It's kind of built into us.
And I would imagine that kind of common language, that ancient common language, is really going to have a resonance with us, maybe even at a level that we can't quite consciously comprehend. And boy, I would imagine that there's some real power in kind of speaking in that language. And boy, what a great opportunity as you're sharing your work and showing your work to share some of that. I think that you would find, some collectors and viewers and buyers are just going to look at your art and respond to it on an aesthetic level, love what you're doing and respond to it positively. But others will be interested to kind of learn more. What is the inspiration? What is the background? And your artist statement and info that you share on your website is a good opportunity to enrich the experience by sharing just as you have been with us. Michelle, let me go to you and then I'll go to Terry.
Hi, I see that Santana is another one, a Canadian expat, and I am too. I'm living just at the Western New York border. And the thing that struck me most about your work is the confidence of all the strokes, of all the marks, of the sort of interaction of the colors together. It's absolutely really professional confidence. There doesn't seem to be any questionable sort of spot in your paintings. They're really good.
Yeah, Michelle, that's an interesting point. What does it? I mean, I'm going to resonate with that, and I'm going to say or ask you. I mean, does it come as a little bit of a surprise that this is a new body of work that she's just developing, having seen just these few pieces?
Yes, except I read everything on the website, and so I think that this body of work really grows from a whole lot of experience and other work and study. The other thing is that the way you talk about this work and explain it, you're really a much better talker than most artists are about their work. If you get a chance, you should always have an opening or an artist discussion about your work. This new work would probably really benefit from a video on your website of you explaining what you just explained to us. And when you exhibit your work, to have a really clear artist statement about it, to in part to move people's thoughts to where yours are about the early history of all mankind, humankind, rather than having people think about it from a point of view of maybe Canadian or Australian Indigenous art. Because I agree with your statement on that and the concerns, but when you're talking about it sort of from the origins of human, of humanity and the cave work, that made so much sense to me. And I mean, really, I think it would benefit. As I said, I read everything on your website, and I think it would really benefit for you to have a video explaining that and to be there in your artwork and explaining it. I think this is just such interesting, unusual, confident work. Really terrific.
Well, thank you. My website is perfunctory at this point, and I was trying to figure out how to introduce this into the website and how to have everything represented, and I'm just not sure what really to do. And thank you for your comments on my presentation. I've done a lot of, I guess I should also fess up and say I'm a performer, a street performer, a stage performer, and I'm regularly up on stage yakking at people, so that really helps.
No, it does, and I'm glad you said that. I mean, and I hope that maybe we all take this as encouragement. Obviously we all come with different skill sets and experiences and inspiration for our work, but I suspect that all of us could benefit from spending a little bit more time kind of thinking about and articulating where our inspiration is coming from. And not only does that then help us when we are talking to someone about our work or sharing an insight on our website or social media, but it could even come full circle and help inspire new work and inspire you to work in a new way as you're being more conscious of kind of what it is you're trying to achieve in your work. Terry, let me go to you.
Hi. Well, your work takes my breath away, and I'm right there with you in my interest in art that sort of, I'm afraid to use the word, but I feel like we have an umbilical cord that we share that goes back to these earlier times. And I think your work strikes that. And I think that's why it's so universal. So I'm right there with you about not dividing it by region or by group or tribe. I think it's all a lot of what we all strive for if we venture out of the landscape still life portrait area is what is that chord we're trying to strike. And I think right now, so this is more emotional than concrete, but I think right now people are really looking for this type of art that gives us a common feeling. So it's valuable. So thank you.
Awesome. And Todd, did you have a comment that you wanted to hop in with as well?
Yeah, I just am really interested in the figurative, the combination of an iconic language and figurative abstraction, and trying to put those two in a context. And you have seemed to select sort of this ancient language, but personally, I'm very interested in more contemporary languages. But your colors are, but the fact that you're actually putting the two together, an iconic language and abstracted figurative work is really interesting to me, and your colors are absolutely stunning. So really appreciative.
June, are you getting a sense that maybe we as a group are encouraging this work, that we like what we're seeing?
Just a little, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think there's a great opportunity there. I do want, and so I want to explore a little bit, and let me go ahead and pull up your website. So I suspect many of us had a chance to go and look at the website, but let's just hop over there, and I'm going to pull up a body of your figurative work. And I think that what we see is that, yes, obviously there are some differences in terms of technique and style and even subject, but there are also some elements that carry through, that it does not come at, it is not a kind of shock to me to see this work and compare it to your other work, because there are some common elements in terms of the palette that's being used, and even some of the compositional elements. But I wonder, and let me just scroll through a few here. I wonder, are there those of you in the group here that have gone through a pretty major transition in your work from maybe one style to another, or even from one medium to another? And how have you handled that in terms of, kind of getting the word out that you're doing something new? How have you handled it on your website or talking to your galleries? Is there anyone that's had that kind of experience, that's gone through a major transition? And what advice might you give to June as she is pushing into a new body of work? And no.
Hi.
Oh, good. Deborah.
Hi, yes. Hi, June. Yes, my work took a huge turn about a year and a half ago. And
notice the timing on a lot of these, that that somehow we, what was it that happened a year and a half ago that gave us some time for reflection and thought? I can't quite figure it out.
Right, for sure. That was definitely part of it. And I think there were also some emotional things that happened to me that changed my way of looking at the world. And because of that, my work really significantly changed from quite realistic looking work to very abstract. And when on my website, what I do, what I've had is, there's a menu item that says art, but when you click on that, there are two areas to go to. One is the abstractions, and the other one is they're called sculptural landscapes. And so I'm pushing the newer work, the abstractions, because that's what I feel closest to right now. But both collections are on the website.
Yeah, and have you had response from your followers? Has there, has the new work started to receive input? Has it started to sell? What has the reaction been?
Yes, I would call myself a re-emerging artist, because I was an artist very, very young in my life, and then my life took a turn into the business world. So it wasn't until 3 years ago that I started making art again. So the first collection was the landscapes, And then I went into the abstract, and I haven't sold very much art yet. I feel like I'm still building awareness and getting the word out and building this, what we have to call as, I guess, a business, which I have problems with, but I have to do it. And so it's hard for me to tell you, but I have gotten very positive response from the abstract work. I also got a lot of accolades from the landscapes, and they seem to live in harmony at this point. So
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you, Deborah. And anyone else with that kind of experience of having made a transition and how you kind of dealt with it and talked to your clientele about it? No? Okay. Well, no, that was good input. And I might just echo what Deborah was saying in that I wouldn't see that it would be too much of a dissonance that you'd be creating by going ahead and adding these newer works in a section on your website. Now, is it possible that some of your clientele will be more interested in the existing figurative and music work and not as interested in the abstract? Yes, and vice versa. Some clientele may be initially drawn to the abstracted work and not be as interested in the other work. But again, this is a case where I can see enough of a common thread running through that work, primarily in the palette and the underlying design elements, that it's not going to be that shock to the system. Where there are times where I'll be working with an artist and we're looking at different bodies of work, and I'll just say, whoa. This has got to be on a separate website. You need to develop a completely different portfolio for this other body of work because it is just so different. And no one would believe that it was coming from the same artist, and it might even cause some consternation. I don't see that as being the case with what you're doing. I mean, as we're looking, well, let me pull it back up here. As we're looking even at this work, the patterns in the background of these middle pieces echo a lot of what we were seeing in terms of the underlying composition in the more abstract work. And certainly the palette that's being used and sensibility, I think could pretty naturally. Now, I would expect that over time, as you start presenting your work to galleries and kind of start building exposure for the work, and start generating sales, I would anticipate that there would start to be a divergence in terms of some of your galleries preferring one style over the other. And you may even find over time that clients respond more strongly to one body of work or the other. And that then starts to create some inertia and even some gravity to pull you towards one or the other. And it's almost inevitable then, that over the course of several years, you end up letting one body of work go to the side and focusing more on the other. But I can't tell you, I mean, I've spent, 32 years in the gallery business, selling art day in and day out. And I would shudder to have to predict which bodies of your work might gain the most interest. Because as soon as I start to try and guess, my clients inevitably prove me wrong. And so the only way to really know is to get the work out there and to start to show it and to see what the responses are to that work. Or alternately, you can kind of, if you feel very strongly about this new body of work and that's where you want to pursue, it may be that it makes more sense to set the other work aside and really focus on building out this body of work, creating a portfolio solely of this work and presenting only that to galleries. In other words, kind of not giving the option to potentially pull you in a direction that you don't necessarily want to be going. And so it's, it is definitely a process. And you're again still pretty early in the process of developing this body of work. So I would encourage you to explore it. You've seen a positive response here, and I would anticipate that you would see that same kind of response from gallery owners and from collectors.
Thank you so much. I have in inventory probably 60 plus of these figurative works, but the danger is if I start promoting those, but I don't really want to work in that for a little while, a couple of years, there's the danger there of somebody saying, yeah, send me more.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a very real, and that is one of the biggest potential pitfalls of a transition like this, is that, you can almost become a victim of success if you happen to find a vein of collectors who are really interested in something that you're not as interested in pursuing now. June, somehow we burned right through our time talking about your work. We didn't get to talk about pricing. I would say that I think there is some potential for increasing the pricing that you're asking on this work. And full disclosure, June has begun working with me in the Art Business Academy. And so we're going to have an opportunity to really dive into that and explore that a little bit more. But my suspicion is that as we explore other comparable artists, that we're going to find that we do have some room to move those prices up, and that as those values increase, that it starts to open doors to some of the venues that would be best at promoting and showing and selling this work. But June, thank you so much for joining us for this session, for letting us talk about your work and see what you're doing. And if we want to follow what's going on, what's the best way for us to keep up with you? You already mentioned social media is not the place to do it. So do you have an email list, or do we just hop on your website from time to time? What's the best way?
Unfortunately, I'm not very good at communicating. So,
we're going to work on that
emailing me
too.
directly, of course. Yeah, we'll work on that. That's why I want to work with you. Yeah. So, probably I will try to keep my website up a little more, and I'll put this work up on the website now. I'm not so afraid of mixing.
I think we would absolutely encourage you to go ahead and do that and to start sharing it there, and then we'll get to work together on keeping people up to date on what your newest work is. Thank you so much for joining us, June. Thanks everyone for jumping into the discussion and for your input. And we'll be back here next Wednesday for another online critique group session. So be sure to join.